Okay, I'd like to call the meeting of the February 22nd Sewage Commission meeting to order. And I'd like to acknowledge that we are working on the unceded traditional territories of the Comox First Nation. In the room today, we have Director Morin, Director Grant, Director Hamir, and online we have Director Hillian, and Director McCollum and Director Cole Hamilton.
I think it's McGowan, not McCollum, actually.
Sorry, Will?
I think it's Director McGowan, not Director McCollum.
Oh, Director McGowan, sorry. Okay, thank you. Okay, I'd like to begin with the management report for receipt. Do we have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Any questions or discussion? Seeing none. Are there any opposed? So that's carried. Okay, moving on to public input. So over to staff, if we had any public input on the financial plan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We have no input to provide for you at this time. And today we will be presenting to you the financial plan. So members of the public that may be engaged or watching this, we encourage your participation, and all the information is available from our website as shown on the agenda here.
Thank you. Do we have to move receipt for that? No? Okay, thank you. Okay, so on to the reports. And this is a continuation of our meeting from last week, where we did have a significant presentation on the sewer system conveyance project. And I'd like to just begin with asking if there are any questions. We've had an extra bit of time to consider the report. There was a lot of information in there.
And Madam Chair, Chris LaRose can put up can share with you the screen that shows the project map. And we do have the slides available from the full presentation. So if there are any questions that the commissioners have with respect to any of the items on this project, we can be available to use those to assist you.
Thank you.
Excuse me, could the host disable or enable, I suppose, my screen share?
And I see we have a question from Director Hillian.
Thank you, Chair Swift. I just wanted to acknowledge that when we closed the meeting last week, Director Morin had asked a question that had to be shortened by nature of the time available, and I wanted to just acknowledge that and see if she felt that her question last week was answered, or if she wanted any further explanation in relation to that.
Oh. So
Director Hillian, that you'd have to refresh my memory, and I don't think we'd want to go down that road because that might take us longer. So I think probably it was answered. Thank you.
Okay, any further questions or need for clarification on anything? I see we have John Esty still as well. Okay. I know we've heard about this conveyance quite a bit, so perhaps there's no further questions at this time.
I do have my hand up again.
Oh, sorry. Okay. Doug.
Thank you.
Director Hillian.
Thank you, Chair. I did ask this question last week, but I would just like to get a refresher on it. And that was the rationale for only testing the acoustic leak detection once a year. I know it was related to the complications involved and the work involved, but it was a matter that came up quite frequently at the two public information settings. And I just wonder if staff might be able to reiterate the response to that, please.
Sure, yeah, of course. And thanks for the question. So what I had summarized was that there's a couple reasons. So first of all, with the shift to gravity flow through this area, there's some operational complexity to undertaking that test. That slide I showed earlier of the water committee of the smart ball being inserted into the water line for inspection of those lines is simplified by the fact that they're always filled with water. There's always enough pressure. So this line would, a valve would have to be shut at the treatment plant. That section would have to be backwatered. And this could only really occur during a lower flow time of the year. We wouldn't have the capacity to throttle down our conveyance line during any time of year where there's any elevated amount of I&I flowing through that line. So that's one piece. There's some significant costs associated with undertaking the acoustic leak detection as well. So that would be a second piece. And then in terms of an explanation of why we feel that that frequency is appropriate, and that would be relating it to that attachment to this staff report, the deferred report from GW, where they summarized the results of their analysis into the likely travel times of wastewater from a hypothetical leak in this area. And so the objective of that memo was to kind of support a minimum distance from the pipe to a nearby groundwater well. And they concluded that 20 meters was an appropriate minimum, and that at that distance, groundwater or wastewater could be expected to take between 370 and 550 days or thereabouts. So given that that there's really only two wells that are anywhere close to that 20 meter mark, and both of those are under consideration for extension of community water. A hypothetical leak, in that very unlikely event of a leak, we could expect groundwater to take significantly more than 1 year to travel. Hence, that 1 year frequency of the inspection is seen to be sufficient to ensure that even in the worst case scenario that a leak were to occur immediately after the last inspection, it would still be picked up well before it had the opportunity to travel to that closest well. And that's assuming the leak occurred at one of those points closest to the well. In reality, 99% of this alignment is well over 40 or 50 meters from any drinking water wells.
Thanks very much. Appreciate that.
Yeah. No problem.
Okay, any further questions? Okay, hearing and seeing none. We have a recommendation on the agenda that the design build components of the sewer system conveyance project noted in the staff report dated February 10th, 2022, with the technical reports be fully endorsed.
Move the recommendation.
Second.
Do we get a first and second? Director Hillian and Cole Hamilton. Thank you. Okay, any further?
Excuse me, Chair. Had we disposed of the receipt motion?
I don't think there was a receipt. There wasn't a receipt.
Thanks.
So we're at the recommendation. Any further discussion? Okay, hearing and seeing none. Are there any opposed? Hearing and seeing none, the motion is carried. Okay. Down to our groundwater protection policy for receipt. Moved and seconded. Now I know we've had an opportunity to look this over, and I think it's important, particularly for those people in Area B on Lazo Hill. So are there any questions? Seeing no questions, we'll move on to the recommendation. Oh, sorry, we'll vote on receipt. Any opposed? Hearing and seeing none, that's carried. The recommendation has been moved and seconded that the Lazo Hill Groundwater Protection Policy attached as Appendix A to the staff report titled Groundwater Protection Policy and dated February 10th, 2022 be approved. Any further discussion? Okay, any opposed? Oh, sorry, we have Director Hillian.
Sorry, Chair, I'm giving you too much work here, getting my own back. I just wonder if staff could let us know if there's been any further response from residents in the area since the completed policy has been drafted, and or if there's a sense that questions from residents have been answered satisfactorily.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I'll just refer to Chris LaRose to respond to that.
Sure, thanks, Russell. And I might bounce that one over to Christiane. I'll say, first of all, that I have not seen any feedback come in through our engineering services desk since those virtual open houses, or since the policy was included on the agenda for the previous Sewage Commission meeting. But I will just ask if Christiane, if anything has come through external relations or CBRD communications.
Yeah, no, I'm happy to add some details. Thanks through the chair. We haven't had any additional follow-ups since those meetings. Interestingly enough, we did have about 40 inquiries come through leading up to the workshops that we did online, and then no follow-up questions after the sessions were complete.
Thanks, Christiane.
So,
And Chair, I just wonder if our if Director Hamir has any feedback on this, given her representation of Area B residents.
Director Hamir.
Thank you. I too have not received any further inquiries from residents of Area B. You know, looking through the groundwater protection policy, I see a lot of great language and financial support for groundwater protection in light of a leak. I guess, and thanks for prompting this, Director Hillian. My only question is around the issue that I brought up last sewer meeting around quantity of water availability. If for whatever reason the sewage pipe in its conveyance interrupted water availability for people's wells, I didn't see any wording around this. Would this draft also protect the availability of water and quantity of water?
I can speak to that. Yeah, so I remember the question from last meeting, and I responded, you know, to the effect that the nature of the horizontal directional drill methodology makes it very unlikely that the either during construction or after that any water would travel along that alignment. And I also mentioned that we are working to establish a solid baseline of groundwater levels and quality in that area against which we can measure impacts in the future. That being said, the policy is definitely focused on impacts to water quality rather than water quantity. Yeah.
Well, as a follow-up, then I'd ask if the Sewage Commission would consider language to the effect of also including quantity in the groundwater protection, just in case, in the very slim chance, knowing that we're monitoring baseline levels, that in the future, for whatever reason, the availability of water was somehow impacted by conveyance, that this policy would protect those residents, and they would have some kind of opportunity to have some recourse if their groundwater availability was impacted.
Yeah, but one concern I have with just kind of tagging on a similar kind of approach or commitment to the water quantity is, what was highlighted during some of the responses, or the presentation, actually a response to a question last week, is that it's fairly easy to detect municipal wastewater in groundwater, so to assess or to confirm whether a leak has occurred, and that is because there's very easy to detect chemical signatures from groundwater, from wastewater, whereas the confirming whether a decline in a groundwater well is attributed to the project or from some other cause would be quite a bit more challenging. Certainly we are establishing that baseline for those now 9 wells, and we've done our best to have those spatially distributed throughout the area, but still that is only 9 wells over a fairly large area. So the baseline, the conclusions from that data, could definitely be kind of extrapolated in the nearby environs to those 9 wells. But as far as capturing the entire area from a groundwater quantity perspective, I have a little hesitation there. So I would probably want to engage with GW Solutions, our groundwater or hydrological experts, to just understand the implications of such a commitment.
Okay, I can understand that. Chair, if I could have just one follow-up. Chris, you mentioned potentially a couple of wells that, if in the unlikely possibility of them being contaminated, could connect with our Comox Valley water system. And are those wells in what region are they? Are they within town of Comox, or are they in Area B?
Yes. So what I highlighted was that there are actually the 2 closest wells to the final alignment. So they happen to be within the town, and they are over 20 meters distant from the proposed alignment, but not much more. So we are in conversations with those landowners, as well as the town of Comox, about a kind of a proactive extension of the town. So there's a number of properties along Butchers that are within the town, but they don't yet have community water. So it just so happens that those 2 properties are 2 of the closest properties to the end of the water line, which hasn't yet made its way down that street. So that what's being considered is extension of water to those 2 properties proactively in advance of the project, so that we don't have any. So we remove the 2 closest wells from that line, and thereby address some concerns. So they're within the town, and they're fairly close to the end of the nearby end of the community water system.
Okay, thanks. And that cost of connection would be borne by the water service, or is it?
It would be borne by the project.
Okay.
By the conveyance project.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chris. Okay, any further questions? Okay, we have the recommendation on the floor. Are there any opposed? Hearing and seeing none, the recommendation is carried. And we're on to the update on the extension of the South Sewers project. And this is a report that's been referred from the Electoral Area Services Committee to the Sewage Commission for information.
Move receipt.
Yep.
And Madam Chair, is it seconded?
Just a minute, we're having a question. That we just did that. Okay, so the South Sewer has been moved and seconded, Hillian and Grant.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And Mark Rutten will give a summary of this and answer any questions. And Madam Chair and Commissioners, I just have to step out for a moment, but James Warren will be acting as CAO in my absence.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Russell, through the CAO and through the chair. So this is just a referred report from the EASC, and the EASC continues to work towards a long-term solution for sewer in the south. As part of this work, a grant application will be submitted to the Investing in Canada Infrastructure Program, and that's due tomorrow, February 23rd. Project staff and elected officials met with Royston and Union Bay residents in late 2021, and community interest for this project remains high. However, project costs are an important concern for residents in the area, and that was one of the main pieces of feedback that we were provided. If a grant can be obtained and a successful project implemented, wastewater from the south will be pumped up and treated at the Comox Valley Waste Management Center, at the Comox Valley Water Pollution Control Center for treatment. The CVRD will continue to provide the community with project updates over the next several months, and will continue to update the Sewage Commission as the project progresses. I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have on this report.
Thank you. We have a question from Director. Oh, no, we don't have a question from Director Moore. Any questions from the people on the phone? Oh, we have a question from Director Hillian.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks, Mark. I just wanted to clarify the amount of the project that the grant would pay for. We received a report at the City of Courtenay recently asking for a letter of support in relation to this, and I believe there was an error in the amount that was indicated the grant would cover. Could you clarify? I believe in the report it says 73%. Is that correct?
Well, the grant program will provide up to 73%, but it also, the program guide also has a requirement that that any individual project not ask for more than 10% of the total amount available in the province. So that total amount is 270 million. So 10% would be 27 million. So for this project, we plan to ask for around that amount, the 27 million, which is not 73% of the total project cost. It is less than that.
Okay, so that was the confusion then. The 10% in the report to Courtenay referred to 10% of what was available for all the grant funding in the province. So I have a follow-up question. Is this the only grant that is being explored right now, or are there other grants that, for example, Comox First Nation might be eligible for?
Well, this is the only grant that we are exploring, the CVRD is exploring for this project. As you mentioned, we are working with project partners. So Comox First Nation has their own process that they're working through to try to secure their funds for this project. Not necessarily a grant process, but they've got some ideas.
Thanks very much.
Okay, any further questions? Okay, we'll vote on receipt then. Are there any opposed? Hearing and seeing none, that is carried. And now we're on to the February 2022 sanitary dumping station update. For receipt? Moved and seconded. And staff, do you have a report for us?
Thanks, Chair Swift. Yeah, Chris LaRose, I think you're ready to present a report on this financial plan.
Yes, thanks, James, and hi again, everyone. So this, so are we by the sanitary dumping station, right? Not the financial.
Yes.
Yeah, sorry. Okay, so yeah, this report is intended as a brief update on progress towards developing a sandy dump station somewhere in the Comox Valley Sewage Service. So to help guide selection of the location or potentially multiple locations, we've identified several key criteria that are being used to help select or identify a location. So the first one, and by far the most significant, is the space for queuing expected from the volume of RV traffic that's expected for a facility. The second is minimizing the impact on residents and businesses from that traffic and any other effects of the station. The third is the proximity to utilities to minimize the cost of installing a sandy dump facility. So after researching other facilities in other jurisdictions, and including the village of Cumberland's sandy dump station up near the Cumberland Village Park, it's clear we need to be planning for at least 100-meter queuing length for those peak times in the summer. And this highlights why local sandy dump facilities haven't lasted, that they don't exist anymore. If you look at any of the locations that we did have in town, a line of that length would be really problematic for traffic control. So to help mitigate the traffic impacts of any one site, we're exploring the concept of two facilities to kind of split the traffic and kind of mitigate that impact of traffic at any one facility. So we're in contact. We're consulting with two potential jurisdictions and also a private property owner to explore the viability of a couple locations. But these conversations are still relatively in the early stages. A number of other options have been explored and rejected because of a conflict, a red flag with one or all of those key siting criteria that I mentioned. So unfortunately, due to the difficulty in identifying a viable location, it's not looking good for having a solution in place by summer of 2022. So we're continuing to push hard to establish or to identify a viable location, but and we'll continue to update the commission and look for an update again in early or mid-spring of 2022.
Thanks, Chris. And we have a question from Director Moran.
Great, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to say I misspoke earlier. It was actually this item that I thought that we had skipped, not the groundwater. So I wasn't sleeping during the groundwater conversation. I just wanted everyone to know. A couple things. I'm hoping that particularly if we're not able to rectify the situation by the summer, which is not looking good, I know that we have had a little bit of reporting out just during regular, press about meetings. We've mentioned this item, but I'm wondering if it might be good to put out some kind of press release clarifying the reason this is taking so long and some of the challenges we're having, because I have had the public wondering why this is taking so long. And I'm also concerned with since the last couple summers with COVID, we have seen a huge increase of recreation vehicles and campers, etc. And there is an interesting little website if you are keen on these kind of things, sandydumps.com, which shows all the sandy dumps in the province and on the island. And interestingly, the North Island, Port McNeill area has about 5 of them. So I like the idea of possibly 2 locations. So I guess my main questions would be, are we able to report out, about the delay on this? And I'm assuming that all these locations have been looked at in trying to come up with a solution, but is that something that we can do?
So Chris, is there any plan for a communications plan?
At the moment, we haven't spoken internally about any proactive communications on this topic. So we could do that. We could talk about or look into, the merits of a press release, or we could develop some messaging that we could share. Be with any residents or businesses that inquire about progress, and that the directors could use to respond to such queries. But maybe I'll just hand it over to Christiane to speak to this.
Yeah, we do actually have a dedicated webpage that we created last summer when we started to talk about this issue, and we're alerted to the fact that many residents and visitors were having trouble locating a Sani dump. So we have that page with a map kind of outlining where those locations exist. We've explained that we are working on this issue with our partners. So I think there's a really good opportunity to update that page with some of the items we've discussed today and share that information via social media as well, maybe particularly as we come into the busy summer months and people may be looking for more information about this. A press release is always an option, but we generally tend to reserve those when we have news, announcements, and investment that we've made, where in this case, that's not particularly relevant. But yeah, Chris is right. We can take this away and discuss it as a team, but those are our tools that do exist now, and we can certainly utilize those to get some messages out around the community.
Great, thank you. And I'm thinking, maybe connecting in with Tourism Vancouver Island as well, if that hasn't happened. It seems like a very trivial thing, but people are very, concerned about this. And I think just with the impact of visitors coming, it would be good to, even on social media, to just bump up the messaging a bit around it. Thank you.
Thank you. And I see we have a question from Director Cole Hamilton.
Thanks very much, Chair. When reading the report, I was intrigued to see the idea of more than one location, which is it's an inventive way of getting around the issue of 100-meter lines by sort of distributing them. I'm guessing that if there were more than one location, if there were two, that they would be geographically distributed so as to allow sort of convenient access from different parts of the Comox Valley. I guess my other question is, does adding a second location automatically double the cost of the capital cost of the project, or would they each be somewhat smaller in scale because they're two, and therefore some savings achieved that way? So just wondering what the financial implications would be of the potential doubling of the number of sites.
Yes, sure. So just in answer to your first question, yes, if we were to pursue two different sites, they would definitely be geographically separated. We were looking at potentially, one in Comox, one in Courtney, type of thing. And as far as the scale of the cost impact, having to accommodate a significantly smaller queuing length would definitely help with costs. So I highlighted the cost of utilities, extending utilities to the Sani dump location, but given the difficulty that we're experiencing in identifying locations, it could be that if we're truly committed as a service to providing a Sani dump facility, we may have to consider some type of land acquisition to enable installation of a facility like this without creating negative impacts on residents and businesses. So if having two facilities could allow us to accommodate Sani dump facilities within the road right of way, and not having to purchase land, then that there could actually be a saving. I just wanted to also flag that if the difficulty continues in identifying a location within the road right of way, we may come back and recommend or ask the commission, if there's any interest in upping the investment and potentially looking at some type of land acquisition to enable a facility like this.
Great. Thanks, Chris. I can appreciate this being challenging to find locations. So again, I think it's a creative solution, and it's good to hear there may be some efficiencies we can achieve in terms of not having to accommodate so much of a kind of lineup space. Okay, thanks very much.
Okay, I don't see any further questions at this point, so we should vote on receipt. Are there any opposed? Hearing and seeing and none, that is carried. And now we're on to the 2022-2026 financial plan for receipt. We have a mover. Do we have a seconder?
Seconded.
Thank you, Director Hillian. Okay, and do we have a presentation from staff?
We do. And Chris, this is for the financial plan. I was one item ahead. So over to Chris.
Thank you, James. And through the chair. Yeah, so just bear with me. I'm just going to bring up a presentation that I've developed to help guide us through this one. Okay. Yeah, so like I said, I've got a brief presentation here to help walk us through this proposed financial plan. If there's any questions, feel free to interject at any point. So first of all, a bit of a brief overview of the service for those of you not quite as familiar with what it is we do. So except for some boundary extensions from either municipality since the infrastructure was built in the early 80s, it really hasn't changed much in terms of service area. It includes all of Courtney and Comox, CFB Comox, and KFN IR1, as well as HMCS Quadra, which is, I guess, considered part of the CFB Comox. Sorry, there we go. The service area doesn't collect any wastewater at all from rural areas other than KFN IR1, which is outside of the municipal boundaries. However, in early 2020, the Sewage Commission did choose to agree in principle to receipt of wastewater from Area A. So there is some prospect that in the future, the service area could be extended south. So wastewater within the service area is collected by the participant collection systems. So Courtney and Comox, CFB Comox, and KFN IR1 all have their own collection systems, the pipes in the streets that collect the wastewater from the businesses and residents, and then funnel that wastewater through to pump stations that are owned by the CDRD, and there's 6 of those now. So the Courtney Pump Station, the Jane Place Station in Courtney, sorry, Comox, Colby Road Station, KFN IR1 has a station, the CFB Comox pump station, which receives water from CFB Comox, but also the 2 new trunk lines installed in 2018 that are starting to divert some wastewater away from Courtney and Comox through the Hudson and Greenwood trunks. And then we have the newest station would be the HMCS Quadra station that collects water from the cadet base out there, and does have the potential to collect water from KFN IR3 should any development occur out at that location. So the service system starts at those pump stations and then includes those stations and the conveyance lines from them to the treatment plant, where the wastewater is treated to a secondary treatment level, and then discharged out of a outfall of Cape Lazo. So that outfall is about 3 kilometers along the beach towards northeast, and then 3 kilometers from approximately the Sand Cliffs directly out towards Texada Island. Another 3 kilometers to about 70 meter depth under the ocean there. The primary byproduct of the treatment process is what we call biosolids, and this is trucked from the plant up to a composting facility. It's kind of like a satellite facility of the services up at the adjacent to the landfill, where that biosolids is mixed with wood chips and composted to create the very popular Skyrocket product, which is a soil amendment. So all this infrastructure is operated by Mike Imrie and his team, most of which are shown here on the slide. So the bulk of the team is based at the Comox Valley Water Pollution Control Center out in Area B, near just past the Lazo Marsh. And then you can see the two individuals on the bottom left there, Rob and Lauren, are the two compost facility operators that are based up at the compost facility. So Rob and Lauren are dedicated to the compost facility, whereas the other operators rotate through on a 2-week rotation through a range of stations or tasks. So they all retain familiarity with that system, with the entire system, and are able to provide an effective on-call service for the service. So before I get into the details of the proposed plan, I'll just walk you through some of the accomplishments for last year, and then the next slide will kind of look at what we've got ahead for this year. So 2021 was a pretty big year. So we completed the odor control project, which was the final phase of odor control at the facility, which covered the bioreactors. So a prior phase had been completed in 2018 that covered our primary tanks, which were significantly more odorous than the bioreactors. But to follow up odor study had indicated there was still an odor concern in the area. And so we undertook a follow-up final phase of odor control, which covered the bioreactors or secondary clarifiers, the bioreactors, with similar covers. And shown here on the top right photo are 2 of those bioreactors with blue covers, and then the brand new shiny aluminum ducting, which creates a negative pressure on the top of those tanks and draws all that air through a chemical scrubber and some of that air through a carbon polisher as well before discharging out of a stack at elevation. So the second item there was the site odor modeling. So a commitment that we made to the community at the same time as the decision was made to undertake this final phase of odor control was that we would do a follow-up kind of study, which we have done, and we'll be bringing the results of that back to the commission shortly. But it indicates that the work was successful, and that odor concentrations at all of the sensitive receptors are expected to be well below 1 odor unit, which is really great news. Another project that was completed last year was consolidation of the controls at our DAF building, which is the dissolved air filtration, which handles which treats the septage receiving and the activated sludge from the facility. So that was a modernization project, which has greatly simplified controls there. We've also completed a we're in the process of completing a staff shower and change room building up at the compost facility, which is much needed to improve the working days of our 2 operators up there. We initiated the overall site master plan study for the treatment plant location. So this will be developing a roadmap for upgrades at that facility over the coming decades, and was a kind of a key conclusion coming out of the liquid waste management plan process. So that was started in 21 and will be completed in 2022. And finally, we completed a major rehabilitation of the 2 remaining primary clarifiers. So Mike and his team rotated those tanks out of service, drained them, cleaned them, and refinished the inside with specialized coatings that will greatly increase or extend their life. Ahead of us in 2022, Mike and his team will be installing online monitoring equipment for just to increase our data capture within the aeration basins, so the bioreactors. And this will help further optimize the effluent quality from the facility. We'll finish the compost facility change and lunchroom, finish the site master plan. Similar to what we did with the DAF building, we're going to be amalgamating the solids dewatering PLC of the controls, which generate that biosolids product that is then taken up for composting. And finally, the big one we'll be really getting underway with the sewer conveyance project. So that one will really dominate the capital plan for the coming 3 years. So now to dive into the summary of the proposed financial plan. So starting with on the revenue side. So there's a year-over-year a 5.5% increase to the requisition as previously scheduled and approved in the prior several financial plans. So that's year-over-year 21 to 22. Revenues forecasted to remain unchanged from the KFN. D&D revenue is will be increasing proportional to the overall requisition or to the overall operational budget per the recently approved new sewer agreement with the D&D. Rates for septic disposal will continue to increase proportional to the municipal requisition. The table at the bottom just shows you the approved requisition increases in the previous 5-year plan versus what we have this time around. So they're identical for 22 to 25, and we've added roughly that 5% order increase in 2026 just to help meet kind of fund the conveyance project and the ensuing debt servicing costs. On the personnel side, we've actually seen a slight decrease in this service and personnel costs projected for 2022, with the increases in wages and benefits due to the QP agreement kind of just slightly more than offset by changes in how positions are allocated to this service from largely from other parts of the organization. And then a kind of an interesting turn of events. We've seen a fairly high turnover with some retirements happening and just kind of trending towards a more junior staff, with lower levels of certification and a slightly lower salary. On the operating side, in line with what was projected or kind of committed to under the COVID renewal plan, we're seeing a decrease in operational costs of about 3.8%. And that's, like I said, largely due to the COVID-19 response and renewal plan. And also because we've got the bulk of the liquid waste management planning process behind us. We still have some costs coming up, but a pretty significant step down in professional fees that we were burning through for the LWMP planning process. So conveyance, it being a capital project, doesn't show up on the operating side until complete, that is. Yeah. From reserves, the contribution to reserves are slated to increase this year to help us put away reserves to help fund and reduce kind of the overall long-term borrowing demands for the conveyance project. And you can see the table at the bottom there just tells you where we're tracking for the end of December 2021. So just over $7 million on the capital works reserve, just over $2 million for the DCC, and about $330,000 for future expenditure reserves. So that over this 5-year plan, the reserves will kind of go down to minimum levels in 24, and then start to increase fairly healthily to help us meet our longer term infrastructure liabilities for this service. On the capital side, we see, as you can see here from this table, the bottom line, a big jump up in overall capital budgeted for this year, attributed to the conveyance project. This work will be funded by a combination of the capital works reserves, DCC reserves for that eligible component, and then short-term debt through to the end of the project, at which point that long-term debt will be converted. Sorry, the short-term debt will be converted to long-term debt. And that's the same approach we took through the delivery of the water treatment project. So we're actually planning to bring forward, just given the size and the complexity of the conveyance project, rather than relying entirely on kind of communicating our approach through this financial plan process, we're going to bring a dedicated report forward to your next meeting. It's March 15th, where we'll just lay out exactly how we'll be delivering, how we'll be procuring the conveyance project, both components of the conveyance project, the design bid build through Comox and the design build for the rest. This is just a very quick summary of the capital spending anticipated for this year. So obviously by far the bulk of that is the sewer conveyance, but we've got a little bit budgeted for a vehicle purchase. We've seen a bit of an increase in the per vehicle cost coming along with the commitment to shift to electrical vehicles, but we expect that to be more than offset by the savings over the life cycle, reduced fuel and maintenance costs. Annual asset management projects. Those are driven by our asset management plan. And this year, just looking at the list, it's mostly just pumps and motors, key pumps and motors being replaced at the end of their lifespan. And then finally, annual capital projects, which include that compost facility, lunchroom, and the PLC upgrade for the dewatering facility. So finally, in summary, just tying, kind of relating back to our corporate strategic priorities. So from a fiscal responsibility perspective, we are, no doubt in a period of intense capital spending. We've had a pretty busy capital plan over the last few years, but it's intensifying now with the conveyance project. So that our funding strategy for that project really strives to spread the impact out between existing users of the service and future users by striking a balance, between reserves and long-term borrowing. From a climate and environmental perspective, obviously the primary driver of the conveyance project is environmental protection to mitigate the risk of failure along the Willamar Bluffs. And we're, throughout the delivery of this project, we're very intent on ensuring that we deliver infrastructure that's resilient to the impacts of climate change and sea level rise. In terms of community partnerships, the conveyance project is an outcome of the liquid waste management planning process, which, as you know, was selected in large part due to its very strong public consultation element. And then the service itself is a collaboration between the service participants. And finally, in terms of Indigenous relations, the conveyance project is being delivered in partnership, with the KFN under the community benefits agreement that was negotiated and finalized at the end of 2020 between the KFN and the CBRD. And within that document, we've made a very firm commitment to complying with the cultural heritage policy to ensure that the project minimizes the impacts on historic sites for the KFN. So that's it. That's all I had for today, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you for the report, Chris. It's always good to see what's been happening and the work plan going forward. So do we have any questions? I don't see any questions, except I do have one, Chris, regarding the liquid waste management group. I believe there was the intention to have a kind of a wrap-up meeting, and I don't know whether you feel you're in a position to set a time for that yet.
Yes, so you're right. So we did plan to have another meeting once the draft LWMP stage 2 plan is complete, to give a chance to have an overview of that document with that committee in advance of submitting it to the province. So we are getting very close to being able to schedule that meeting. We expect that to occur in late April or early May. And then Christiane and her team are planning actually, maybe I'll just ask Christiane to just provide a bit of an update on our plan for public consultation relating to the final stage of the LWMP. Christiane, are you still there?
Yep, absolutely. So we are looking at spring open house. We're looking over some dates early in April with the plan to come back to the public and wrap up that LWMP process. And at the same time to release the final scope for the conveyance project and explain how those two projects are linked and how the scope was developed, how that project came about. It did start as part of the same process through the LWMP, even though it has been now moved out on its own. thanks to the referendum. So that will happen in April. That'll kind of be the last big public outreach for LWMP. And then, as Chris said, the team will be working on the next phase of the report to be shared with the TAC PAC and then submitted to the province. And we will do a final sharing of that report once it's finalized with the community.
Thank you. Are there any further questions? Okay, seeing none, we need to vote on receipt. So are there any opposed on receipt? Hearing and seeing none, that's carried. We have the recommendation that the proposed financial plan for the Comox Valley Sewage Service, function 335 to 338 be approved.
With the recommendation.
Thank you. Any further questions or discussion? Okay, are there any opposed? Seeing and hearing none, that is carried. And then we can move to termination.
So moved.
All in favor or any opposed? Hearing and seeing none?